logistics, the PowerPoints from day one are up, plus a Microsoft Word doc with all those blog links. So in case you aren't familiar with any of those people, The Root, which is kind of like a black website run by the Washington Post. There's a 3-part interview with Henry Louis Gates, Skip Gates, with Tarantino, talking about that. There's also Hillary Crossley from The Root also does a review of Django. Ishmael Reed from Wall Street Journal does, how many of you know who Ishmael Reed is? Okay. It's all right. Listen, you should be picking up on all these different voices, all right? Lil Monster, in the first days of the rebellion in LA, and no, this ain't the time period, but I'm just letting you know in terms of underground information. Lil Monster Cody, so his brother, Monster Cody, started the Crips in LA. And this is like right after the rebellion in Los Angeles, and there's a reason if you stick with the class, you'll find out why we call it the rebellion and not the second riots. A rebellion is planned. Riots are spontaneous. This was planned. So Ted Koppel is walking down Normandy with Lil Monster Cody, right? So Ted Koppel used to do Nightline on ABC, etc., right? So he's walking down at the corner of Florence and Normandy, which is ground zero for the rebellion, and burned out stores and makes very good TV. So he's talking with Lil Monster about, what are the issues behind the rebellion. And so Lil Monster just throws out, well, I was reading last week in the Wall Street Journal. And Ted does a double take. You were what? Yeah, I was reading last week in the Wall Street Journal. And he goes, wait, this gang member reads the Wall Street Journal?
You're off that stereotype.
Yeah. I mean, you can see him do that. Yeah, he said, yeah, of course we read the Wall Street Journal because it's about money, and that's the paper about money. And this wasn't about Rodney King. This is about Eula May Love. This is about, and he starts rattling off a bunch of names, which if you didn't, there are people killed by police that didn't necessarily make the ink. The only thing that was standard run-ins. When I grew up in LA, basically you stood a 50-50 chance of surviving an encounter with LAPD. No matter how you were dressed. Go for your wallet, you're shot dead in front of your pregnant wife. Go into the hospital. That was Johnny Cochran's first famous case, before Michael Jackson and before O.J. Brother got killed, wrongful death. Before that, Johnny was a prosecutor for LA, and he quit the prosecutor's office to do that. Right? So Lil Monster's saying, yeah, we were reading in the Wall Street Journal. He said, well, who are your leaders? And he goes, I'm not telling you who our leaders are. We learned our lesson with Malcolm and Martin. If we name them, you'll kill them. But yeah, we watch the money, et cetera, right? So the fact that Ishmael Reed has a blog for the Wall Street Journal, and he's critical he's critical of Django, and he's saying, look, how come we have to have, how come we're not controlling our image? I mean, that's one of the things he's asking. So, I mean, there's a wide array of levels that you can interpret this particular film. I mean, again, like I said Monday, this is not necessarily the story that we would tell, though that we can relate to it. But we have to know, and that's one of the links that also from Charles Blow, who writes for New York Times, it's basically saying, okay, lots of people escaped slavery, lots of them. This film gives you the illusion that there's only like one Django. No. I mean, that's like saying Jews didn't resist Hitler. Every step of the way, every day. But who's writing the history books? The Nazis. I shouldn't say that. I'll be nice. All right? So pick up on that stuff. Does everybody have PowerPoint so you can read the slides and all that? Because I can make PDFs, but they get bigger because it's harder to do for the computer anyway. All right. Let's see. All right, visual grammar. Did I mention visual grammar? All right, so it's a film term. You know, like that old, I think it's a Chinese proverb, picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So in film, there's visual grammar that are saying more than what the dialogue is in the film. Like I'll be using a little bit of astronomy today, you know, talking about like Amistad as an example, right? So the English word nature comes from Latin natura, which comes from the Chumedian or Egyptian word for God that is neter and creation, neteru. Like the idea is that God is in creation and not like the white guy throwing thunderbolts, but an intelligent organizing principle inside every atom. In fact, the word atom comes from Kemet, and it's a deity, an intelligent conscious deity inside of physical material being that got translated into the whole Greek configuration as the smallest undividable particle of material being. Right? But in a quantum sense, and this is the sense that the Chumedians are using it, right? This device doesn't recognize it is a physical device, but it receives signal as if the physical world doesn't matter for the most part, except in my office. Got a cell tower right up there, and I'm like in a dark zone. I think because of the metal scattering the signal, theoretically. But, right? So it's a quantum device, and that means that in quantum devices, it's all about energy and energy relationships. Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. Matter and energy are the same thing moving in different speeds. Okay? Neter and neteru. Deity is in creation. Creation is deity. If you want to know God, study the universe. Because there ain't no place that God ain't, basically. Now, this is a belief, ancient African belief, and also there are other, people of tradition that believe in that same way that say, look, everything's conscious, so you need to pay attention to everything and act as if you're connected. In fact, evil is acting as if you are not connected and that your actions have no consequences. Because what goes around, come on, that's call and response, comes around. Okay. Sankofa birds say, go back and fetch it. Sankofa birds say? Okay, all right. Not step and fetch it. All right, so God is present in creation. Best way to know God is to know thyself through study of the universe. This is where the concept of the university came from, because that's where the first universities were on the planet. In Africa, or Al-Kabula, in Kemet, which the Greeks called Egypt. Okay, so you do this in a formal, disciplined way in the university. So if you notice what happens at universities in our system, here in the English and other speaking world, the university in Kemet was where different aspects of creation were studied and related to the whole. And interrelated to the whole. So if you were drawn to a particular course of study, like you're really a numbers person, then you go into mathematics, where, did I say algebra is the mending yet? I'm old. I'm losing it sometimes. So, algebra means the mending. The image is of a broken stick I'm a psych major, not an art major, okay? Broken stick. The equal sign unites the halves. What you do to this side, you got to do to that side. What you do above, you go below. Those of you who are taking algebra, order of operations, or the acronym what? PEMDAS. Or please excuse my dear aunt. Please excuse my, thank you. I got slides for this, but please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So, what you're doing is you start and do the hardest thing first. So it's not about mathematical computation. It's a mental and spiritual discipline. Numbers describe the world as well as words do, actually in a shorter form than words do. There's some places where you have to use numbers and you can't use words. And algebra also shows you to substitute letters for numbers or words or concepts so that you can do interchangeable thought process. So what this is teaching you is if you have the basic mathematical operations in place, you know your times tables, you know how to add and subtract and divide, you can solve any problem. Okay, so part of the visual grammar, in order to have visual grammar, you have to have verbal grammar. Have to have an alphabet. Have to have numbers. Got to have both, right? That's taught in the university. So it's not just math. It's philosophy in that original university. So you notice it ain't taught like that. But it's actually a mathematician that pointed this out to me in order to make it more successful or accessible for women and minorities. Why? Because women and ethnic minorities learn stuff better when they can immediately relate it to their life. Like right now. What does this shit do? Now. It's nice, okay, I need algebra, to be, that we hear this all, calculus. What do I need calculus for? Well, calculus is a small boy, sorry to say this, but small boy hitting a moving target with a rock. That's all it is. Motion, rates of change, tracking that, being able to successfully do that. That's what calculus is, except it's describing a process. So on a certain level, when you start getting into levels of math and deep into quantum physics, you are starting to blur the line between the intellect and spirituality. Einstein said that. Einstein was also a fervent anti-racist. Yes, he was a genius, but because he was a genius, he was also for racial and spiritual harmony between the races. And he worked for that. Now, that's not talked about. You know him about E equals MC squared, and we'll talk about that whole thing later on in the term. But that's also a hidden side of him, too. All right, so the university was where different aspects of creation were studied and related to the whole. Here in the Western world, we study them as separate disciplines and don't even talk about how they're interrelated. Notice that? That's often difficult and confusing for people. So when I basically say, okay, algebra is basically, you can relate this to counseling. Well, how? Well, you can say, PILFDAS. Pain, loss, fear, depression, anger, serenity. This is what you have to work through to successfully heal yourself psychologically. Just like in PEMDAS, you started to do the hardest thing first. In counseling, to be successful, you have to go to the center of the greatest pain that they're willing to talk about. And you have to talk about it first. You have to have done that in yourself. So you go there, especially if it's a difficult subject. You raise it first, especially if you got a clue, right? So I'm basically applying an Afrocentric approach to not only this class, but this is how this works. This is where this came from. Now, hopefully this gets you through your, if this is useful to get you through your math class, great. But all right, so yeah, astronomy, mathematics, chemistry, literature, mysticism, music, martial arts, meditation, all those were subjects within the universities at Kemet. What we call in English the Egyptian mystery schools. Well, they weren't a mystery. It's just that you had to prove that you were capable of learning to get in by mastering yourself. In fact, that was one of their definitions of being the difference between a master and a slave. Can you master yourself or not? So, discipline is to cultivate and follow an inner teacher. So within the framework of the Comedian universities, the assumption is the wisdom of the universe is in you already. Already inside you. The purpose of education is to draw it out so that you can connect your inner dots. More on that in a little bit. Connecting those dots. But discipline, to cultivate and follow an inner teacher in 3 levels of initiation of self-mastery. I anticipated somebody was going to ask, what levels of initiation do you mean, Mark? So somebody asked that.
What levels of initiation do you mean?
All right. Thank you. This is part of what we've been, or at least when I teach the classes in our Rites of Passage program here at Lane, though it's often lost on middle school and high school kids, and some people pick up on this or not. So the mystery school is it's not a mystery, it's my story. You have to understand you're part of the universe. You have a human life. And there's a purpose. There's a life purpose. You have a life purpose. Nobody is born without one. No one. No one is not born without a life purpose. Everyone has one. Everyone. If you're here, on a certain level, this is a dangerous planet. Okay? Not terribly civilized. Angels fear to tread here because you forget who you are here. It's real easy to do that. And if you express your life purpose, they think you're crazy. And they will tell you that, and they'll try and talk you out of it. Right? Einstein said this. I mean, I could quote lots of people besides Albert, but I'm just channeling Albert. Great minds have always, experienced opposition from small thinkers. Look, the dude flunked math. Einstein flunked math. I knew a kid in Tacoma that flunked math. This kid at 13 was a bank for 3 different street gangs at Hilltop in Tacoma. $1 million cash transactions in his head for 3 different drug dealing gangs. And at 13, he best to be getting the money straight. And he has to stash it because a 13-year-old can't do a bank account. Right? So, be able to produce the money on demand, have an accurate count, etc., etc. But he flunked math. probably from a teacher that can't balance their checkbook. So I'm just saying, mathematical genius exists on lots of different levels and lots of different ways that may or may not be validated by the fact that you got a sheepskin from a 4-year or 2-year school. All right? So, the Egyptian mystery schools had 3 grades of student at 3 stages. First, the mortal. They are probationary students who are being instructed but who had not yet experienced the inner vision, sometimes known as initiation. Second, the intelligences, that is, those who had attained the inner vision and initiation and illumination and received mind, or what is translated as nous, which is consciousness, illumination. So the intelligences are illuminated. And then 3, the creators and sons and daughters of light, that these people who have become identified with, that is, you know who you are, and or are united with, you act as if you are the light. So one title for this spiritual attainment was Christ. Christ was a title in the Egyptian mystery schools. Not only did you have the vision, but you could speak what you saw into reality. That's a level of self-mastery. In fact, you could see into other people and call the best of them out into reality, even if they didn't believe it. So I'm operating on the assumption, because there's this piece on NPR, which I had already seen in the New York Times about Encinitas, which is south of San Diego. They're teaching yoga classes, and the fundamentalist Christians, oh, well, that's religion, blah, 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 blah. Yoga's beyond religion. Yoga is basically like a martial arts or mind-body discipline to develop and support spirituality. In my framework, Christ was a yogi. Because yoga came from Africa, not India. India was a colony of Africa. Okay? Om is, you'll be seeing this. Om is inscribed in papyrus in the pyramids. The first 35 yogic postures, Sphinx, Cobra, cat and cow, they're inscribed in the pyramids before they're in India. Who developed yoga? Okay, so in the black community, when I do yoga workshops, it's like, okay, and then people are talking about this same conflict that was on NPR and the New York Times. This is a conflict between my Christian faith and yoga. That's only if you think Jesus is white. Because a person who went through this training could do all kinds of things that normal mortals thought was out there. But it really is breaking down like this. If the only way, can I use your pen as a prop? If the only way you know how to make fire is by rubbing sticks together, matches look like magic. If the only way you have of making fire is a match, a lighter looks like magic. You feel me on this? It's basically application of higher law in science that is discoverable and immediately applicable. Thanks. Right? So I'm not basically saying anything. So yoga came before all the Abrahamic religions anyway. But all the Abrahamic religions took pieces of the Egyptian mystery schools. Check it out. Look, Moses, who started Judaism, was abandoned by his mama, picked up by Pharaoh's daughter, and raised as Pharaoh's grandson. So the Egyptian state religion is this. What do you think Moses is going to be raised in? How do you think him and Aaron can, turn a staff into a snake and back? If that's real. Okay, that could be a myth. Well, let's say, what if they're describing actual events? I don't know. A burning bush could be aliens and doing Hollywood special effects. You know, I mean, sure. But what if it's real? How would we replicate it today? So do I need to do fish dinners and all the wine you can drink? No. But I can talk you out of your drug habit by seeing the clean and sober, liberated person that's in your heart that's amid the suffering addict. So I don't believe in talking about stuff unless it's real, unless I've tried it and it works. Right? That's my standard. So 3 stages: initiation, illumination, perfection. So initiation, you see with the inner vision. Illumination, you see the inner vision reflected out in the world. Perfection, the outer world comes to reflect the inner divine world through your active, illumined intervention. You cannot just do this in a cave. Okay? The purpose of a human life is to transform yourself and the world. Okay? Dalai Lama said this. Buddha came out of this school too. He was a prince. He didn't even have to become the Buddha. He could have just said, oh, sucks to be you. But no, he says, life is suffering, and I'm going to find ways to liberate human beings from suffering. Right? So it ain't an easy path, but it is a higher path. They might crucify you or kill you or shoot you through the head or whatever, but that's okay. At the 3rd level, your body is just clothes anyway. Are you still attached to the jeans you wore in high school? Well, I like my 501 button-ups, but... All right. So you are perfecting through practice your vocation as you are called to it. So your vocation is your voice, literally. Vocation literally means voice, like in Latin. So your word becomes manifest as a seer and creator on earth. Okay? Once you've achieved that level through practice. Yeah, I know this sounds like all self-help stuff, but where do you think they're getting this stuff? Without giving Africans credit. So, all right, so the universe's call compels your answer in your work. So yeah, this will be up later today. So the difference between mental slaves, from mental masters and mental slaves, is the master possesses mind, nous, that is consciousness or awareness of the unconscious amenta, which is the Comedian word for the infinite personal reservoir of knowledge. That is, each one of us has the wisdom of the universe in us. And they call that the amenta. Now, within this particular framework, the unconscious is not, it's accessible. It's like an ocean. And you're on the surface. So you have to dive deep to get it. And bring it back up, and then it becomes conscious. Or sometimes you access it in the dream world, in the dream state. There's a funny iPhone commercial. You know, Dudical is having a dream where he's playing ping pong against the Williams sisters and winning. Okay. Cute. So Marley talked about emancipate yourself from mental slavery. Is that sensibility that he's talking about. The master has self-mastery and has access to the amenta, universal wisdom, and the mental slave did not. So unconscious means that the store of knowledge that we are unaware of, not that it's unknowable. From an African point of view, the knowledge of the universe and the university is already in every person from birth. And the purpose of education is to draw that knowledge out rather than pour it in. Okay, so notice how our system works here. Okay, educational bulimia. Stuff you full of facts, you spit them out on a test. Does it have any application to your life? Maybe, maybe not. And those who successfully do stuff on a test, well, get passed on, and those who do not, sucks to be you. Thanks for giving us your tuition money. Hate to be raw about that, but, you know, look. They put barriers. So this is where I'm pulling this stuff from. There used to be a bookstore in South Central called the Aquarium Bookstore. I went there as a kid. This is where I would go into this store down the street from where we lived on 48th Street in South Central. Was now called South Central, now it's called South. And go into this bookstore where Alfred Ligon and his wife had all these classic Black history books. And they were there. And I go, oh, Dad's got this. So Franz Fanon, oh, Richard, wow, that's in my library too. So they had not only Aquarium Bookstore, not only do they have astrology classes, but yoga, martial arts, African history classes, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about the 60s. Now, this was actually the model for Black bookstores across the country. It was the first and oldest Black bookstore in the United States, opening just after World War II, and continuously operating till they burned it down in the rebellion. And Alice Walker and Maya Angelou put up some money to get it going, and again, and it went for a few months, and then his wife developed cancer or something like that, and he closed it. But it is the model for the Black bookstore, classic model for Black bookstores across the country. All right, so if they wanted you to achieve, they wouldn't oppress you, which is precisely the point of achieving, especially when they oppress you. But you have to be in touch with a sense of mission and purpose to not let them talk you out of it. All right, so takes a nation of millions to hold us back. Did I tell you about Chuck D and Kareem? Sundance Channel, I don't know if this is on iTunes yet, but I'll turn you on to another one that is on iTunes. The Sundance Channel has a series called Iconoclasts. And it's basically celebrities interviewing each other. So there's one with Chuck D and Kareem. And Kareem is basically talking about, most people know Kareem, in terms of his sports career, but not as a scholar, which is how he identifies himself. Yeah, I have this yard-long stick of rings. But, that's not my thing. Books about the Black Panthers, not the radical Black Panthers, the tank division under Patton that liberated Auschwitz, fought continuously for 6 months without a break. Black soldiers. He wrote a book about that, among other things. Right? So, and if you are familiar with Public Enemy's work, you know where they're at. So imagine that interview. That's deep. Because Kareem used to babysit for Thelonious Monk's drummer's kid. So he's all into jazz. His father was a jazz trombonist. He's a bass player. But nobody knows anything about, it's only about the sports thing, Talks about, why he developed the skyhook and all that kind of stuff. So there's another Iconoclast show, season 2, episode 6. It's on iTunes. It's called, it's a pairing between Dave Chappelle and Maya Angelou. And that's an hour long. The one with Kareem and Chuck D is 24 minutes, but that's an hour long. Oh, it is way deep. Because he's like, wow, you're Maya Angelou. You're like a cultural treasure, and I'm just an entertainer. Well, she said, look, entertainers can be cultural treasures too. And so he's saying, you know, when you're saying Malcolm and Martin, I'm thinking Martin Lawrence and Malcolm Jamal Warner, but you're talking about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And they were your friends? She said, yeah, well, they were friends too. But you don't know that necessarily, right? Because we're not taught that. We're thinking that they're opposed to each other. So, Naeem Akbar, and we'll get into this actually later, contemporary Afrocentric psychologist, articulated a vision of the African self, which replicates views developed in the mystery schools of Kemet, in various African websites. And with the fall of Kemet, its technology and information wisdom spread all over the world, spread throughout Alkebulan, Asia, and Turtle Island here. So to continue with the simplex, complex, multiplex theme in relating to astronomy. So let's take a simple concept that's cross-cultural. Pattern of stars we call a constellation. In counseling, we talk about a constellation of symptoms. And since this isn't a therapy class, I'm not going to tell you about the construct I developed from this. We'll just do straight astronomy. Simplex. Simplex view is a pattern of stars constellation. Now, when people look in the sky and they see that pattern of stars, they might not think too much about what that is. I mean, but you understand that it's in space and that it's not a flat picture, right? But you can use it to guide yourself on Earth. So here's one of the things in the visual grammar of the film Amistad. Okay? So when I say there's 150 slave rebellions at sea, some of them were successful and some of them were not. The successful ones were the slaves, took over the ship and killed all the crew and sailed themselves back to Africa. Spielberg alludes to this in Amistad because the mistake that the Amistad rebellers made was they let the crew live. And so at night, and it shows this, they're looking at the stars and, okay, we're going to Africa. But in daylight, when the stars ain't there, the crew's sailing them back. Night comes, day comes, they should have just killed the crew and gone straight back to Africa. But history determined that it was to be otherwise. So how did they know? Because remember, our view of slaves is that slaves are ignorant savages. How do they know? By looking at the stars that this direction is the correct direction. That was common knowledge. Okay? Without a formal education or a mystery school. This is taught in villages. Estad and Runnings, pre-contact, pre-diaspora. So, simplex. Pattern of stars, constellation that you can use to navigate. Complex, the history of names of constellations in different cultures and their meaning and implications for earthly living. So there's more story. And then the multiplex view. Multiple dimensions, alternate conclusions, different relationships. So, as an example, this is I borrowed from my therapy class. You recognize that pattern, yes? What's it called? Big Dipper. Notice the names of the stars. It's upside down relative to where we see it in the sky. But you immediately recognize it, yes? Dubi, Mirak, Fekta, Megrez, Aliyaf, Mizar, Al-Qaid. Anything sound familiar about that? Notice the language that is? Come on, sing it out. Don't be afraid to make a mistake.
Seems kind of like Arabic, kind of.
It is exactly Arabic. Now, I don't know. I hate when, I make reference to popular culture and movies because,
You kids, you need to read more books, not get your history from movies.
Morgan Freeman in Robin Hood, okay, pulls out a telescope, which Robin Hood didn't know about, right? Because Morgan Freeman's character is an Arab, a Moor, right? Pulls out this round glass globe on one end, and yeah, I can see these people, right? And he'd never seen that, which is an accurate portrayal of history. We developed telescopes and astronomy first, as far back as Egypt. Okay, that technology fell into the hands of various other folks that were around, including people that we now think of separate, like Jews and Arabs, etc., etc. But everybody had their own particular framework to deal with, right? So these are Latin characters, right? And so when you anglicize from another language, the spelling gonna change, right? So I'm playing basketball with my friend Ib, who owns Casablanca and, Soraya and stuff like that. And Ib has this weird shot. He shoots like this, which shouldn't work. But it does. And he's really good at these weird angles. I mean, I have a skyhook shot, and I hit, I'm short, so I don't like to get in the extra hardwood, but, black style of basketball, no blood, no foul. We're Klingons that way, right? You're supposed to make the shot with contact in your face. I expect to get hit. I'm used to that, right? That's what Kareem was talking about. Ib don't like contact. And sometimes he would camp out in the key. When he, on offense. No. But we're not going to do the 3-second rule. I'm going to move against you. I'm not going to avoid contact. You're going to have to hit me and move, or I will hit you. Right? So he's trying to push me off, and I'm not moving. And he says, "You're like a rock. You're like a fortress." And I said, so he's Palestinian. I said, "So what's that word in your language?" Al-Qaid. What? Really? Wow. Tell me what the story is. So, we're taking a break because now, other teams are on the court. So, break this down to me. This ain't no damn coincidence, is it? So I know in your language, a single word can mean up to 10 different things. So what does Al-Qaid mean? You just called me like a rock. Said, well, Al-Qaid means the foundation of the fortress wall can't be moved. Remember, Al is the commander commander or leader, and the code we live by. Wow. Okay. So, of course, in English, we'll translate this or spell it as Al-Qaid. Al-Qaeda. Right? So, okay. Deeper and deeper. Wait, that's a star, isn't it? Yes, it is. What's your name for the constellation? You guys call it the Big Dipper, off of a set of different mythologies. We call it the scales. The scales. So, what is that? Al-Mizan. The scales. Oh, okay. So the scales. So let me put this together. I'm connecting the dots here. Remember, 9/11 happens. Bush announces the quote of war on terror. We're invading Iraq. There was a name for that conflict that he said that sent the Arab world into a frenzy. Do you recall what that was? Operation Infinite Justice. Now, who put the stars in the sky? Come on, this is not hard, right? Come on. God. Okay, now if God put scales in the sky, what would they measure? Not just human souls, not bad.
Lifespan.
Huh? Lifespans, not bad. That's another mythology. Human souls, yes, that's correct. Correct mythology. Keep going. Right and wrong. What else? And that concept of right and wrong, scales of justice is justice, right? Ma'at, or now we have justice, because now we've moved from Egyptian to Roman, to Greek to Roman. Scales of justice, justice is blind, right? She don't care who you are, right? Scales in the sky are measuring infinite justice. Operation Infinite Justice, wait a minute. America's saying they're God? No. And they're already, no. Okay, so, Colin Powell, Condi Rice could have said, nah, don't do that. You're going to piss some people off. They're already paranoid that you're on a global domination path. Do not do that. Go ahead.
Did he call that on purpose? Did he know the background?
No, come on.
No advisors let him know that.
They probably did, but he's the decider. No, look. Knowing your adversary, look. Barb drank during his pregnancy. Yeah, during W's pregnancy, his mom drank alcohol. She is an alcoholic. She drank during his pregnancy. He was an alcoholic, yeah, which is a very common outcome for people who are fetal alcohol syndrome. Except he doesn't have the fetal alcohol syndrome. He has, he basically is fetal alcohol effects, or fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. He's got that. So not all there. But they're enough to act as president. Not necessary to think things through, even if he's got advice.
What school did he go to?
His daddy got him into Yale, where he got a C average. How does being, I wish being president, you had to have a minimum IQ. No. So all I'm saying is, right, yeah, he was probably advised, and that's why I'm saying Condi or Colin Powell or any number of people could have advised, don't say that. So they changed it to Operation Iraqi Freedom. Okay. A little better. But you put Saddam in power. You armed Saddam. We got the receipts on the arms you sold him. So that ain't kind of working for us either, but yeah. All right.
And they train out Bin Laden too.
Yes. Well, we didn't put Castro in office, but it's more complicated than that. We'll get to that when we get to that part of the term. Going off on enough of a bird walk, but I'm just saying constellations are not just patterns in the sky. Okay? There's a story. Okay? We call it, in English, the Big Dipper from a particular set of mythology. All right? Because that's in English, black slaves escaping slavery, because this is how we do. We talk in code. That's part of Ebonics. You feel me? Okay? So